Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard the Wright Flyer. I'm Randy Wright, and I'll be your captain on today's Solo Flight Special edition of our state-of-the-art radio program. Folks, this will be the final boarding call, so if you please, claim your seats, fasten your seatbelts, kick back, relax, and enjoy the show while I go ahead and delve into the pre-flight checklist, because there really is a lot of news and information to get to before I may fully indulge you with your in-flight entertainment. Well, folks, today's story of discussion comes straight out of Canada. You know, that nation that has always had a bit of a socialist streak within it. And a very tragic thing has happened in Canada, and that is that there has been a shooting at an Aboriginal school in Saskatchewan. So apparently, this happened in Western Canada. It has left 4 dead, including a teacher, and it has wounded an additional 2 people. And the La Loche Community School, which is in the remote Diné Aboriginal community of La Loche in Saskatchewan, is a 7 to 12 grade school. So it's basically almost like the high school that I went to, which started at grade 7 and went all the way up to 12th grade. So it had junior high and high school classes. Now, there was a 23-year-old girl, Marie Janvier, who was a teacher, had also been shot dead by the gunman, and the police told him that the first 2 shots fired by the gunman killed 2 of his siblings, meaning the gunman's siblings, before Janvier's daughter was killed. And we then see that the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, was in Davos, Switzerland, and he said that a suspect was in custody and described, the event. And he said that it was every parent's worst nightmare and that the community is reeling. Now, folks, it's absolutely true that these events are horrific and tragic, but you know that the political powers that be and the détente wing of the gutless opposition party here in America, and especially the members of Barack Hussein Obama's regime, are looking for a way to make political clout out of this. Because as Rahm Emanuel, who is in battle right now, as the mayor of Chicago said, you never let a tragedy go to waste. And so they are immediately hopping into high gear with this. In fact, the U.S. ambassador to Canada, Bruce Heyman, offered condolences, but took the opportunity to politicize the issue, just like President Barack Hussein Obama wants everyone to do, to say that, quote, "We have experienced similar tragedies far too often in the United States and understand all too well the heartache and sadness that result." Well, yes, we understand it, and yes, it happens too much, but we instantly jump to blaming the firearm. But have you noticed that these types of shootings have been occurring with greater regularity in places that are so-called gun-free zones? Folks, this is what the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media don't want to talk about. They don't want to mention this. And the reason they don't want to mention it is because it goes against their propagandistic message. And what, pray tell, is that propagandistic message? Well, it's quite simple. The message is that it's the gun. We have to get rid of guns. Folks, guns do not get up on their own, run out, and shoot people. They just do not do it. But you're not going to convince these people on the radical and extreme fringes of the left, these Fabian socialists that want to fundamentally transform society, of reality. They operate off of raw emotionalism. And that's all they operate on. They don't act out of a sense of rationality. They don't act based on logic or reason. And so it shows that there is this duplicitous nature with the political powers that be in wanting to strip law-abiding American citizens of their fundamental and unalienable right to keep and bear firearms, that they will even go so far as to point to things that happen in foreign countries. But they don't point to the fact that it's because of these gun-free zones, that it's because of these failed Fabian socialist policies that are designed to destroy the entire notion of popular sovereignty because they want us to be subjugated to a new age form of feudalism. And you certainly see that the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media are trying to couch this in a way as to show that we just need to ban guns altogether. This comes out of the ABC News report of it, and I'm looking at one of the paragraphs here, and I'm going to quote it verbatim, folks. Shootings at schools or on university campuses are rare in Canada. However, the country's bloodiest shooting occurred on December 6, 1989, at Montreal's École Polytechnique, when Marc Lepine entered a college classroom at the engineering school, separated the men from the women, told the men to leave, and opened fire, killing 14 women before killing himself. So what we see is they're trying to say it's rare. It's rare. And it's rare because Canada has strict gun control laws. But stop and think about it for a moment, folks. If these students could have been armed, or were armed, they could have taken that schmuck out before he went on his rampage of terror. Now, I know that it seems like we repeat this message time and time again every time one of these tragic, unspeakably horrific, violent events occurs. And that's because we absolutely do. Because the narrative that is being pushed forward by both governmental agents and the salivating mainstream media fail to take into account reality, fail to actually state real-world, practicable solutions that would stop this, or that would certainly lessen it. Folks, you will never get rid of all of the bad apples, if you will, among society. You just never will. There will always be somebody who is a fry short of a Happy Meal. There will always be somebody who is driven by a malicious heart and malcontent and is rotten to their core. But the answer is not to make everyone equally defenseless, because these people will break the law irrespective of what the law says. In fact, that's why we call them outlaws, because they operate outside of the law. So all you are doing whenever you establish these so-called gun-free zones is you are making the decent, law-abiding citizens exposed to greater danger. You're making them less safe. But that doesn't fit the Joseph Goebbels-style propagandistic message that the salivating mainstream media and this Barack Hussein Obama regime want to put up. And a major difference between Canada and the United States is that in the United States, our forefathers had the foresight to include a protection for the fundamental and unalienable right to keep and bear firearms. It is absolutely our most sacred right that was endowed to us by our Creator, because it is via our Second Amendment right that we protect all of our other fundamental and unalienable rights. And so once again, we have to recall that the framework of the United States government and Constitution, and indeed society in general and as a whole, are based on those timeless natural law principles that underpin the clear and concise language contained within the four corners of our shared Constitution. And that our fundamental and unalienable rights are endowed to us by a greater power, meaning that no earthly authority acting in legitimate fashion can belittle, encroach upon, abridge, take away, or destroy our fundamental and unalienable rights without first going through proper judicial due process, that is, due process under the law, and adjudicate that the person whose rights are being stripped have encroached upon the rights of a fellow citizen. You see, folks, that's what it comes down to. Our rights only end where someone else's begin. And we have to be responsible stewards of our rights. But the government is not in the position, nor is it delegated the authority to strip us carte blanche of our fundamental and unalienable right to keep and bear firearms. Now, wherever there is free will, there will always be a certain threat to security. The most secure places are usually those that are authoritarian by nature, do not allow individual thought, do not allow people to think and act for themselves. And such a mentality is diametrically opposed to everything that we cherish and value as American citizens. It goes against the very foundational energy and vision that our founding fathers had for this country when they established it well over 200 years ago. But this is not the type of analysis that you will ever hear from the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media, nor is it what you will hear from those acolytes of the cancerous doctrine of political correctness, such as President Barack Hussein Obama, who at every given opportunity used these tragedies, irrespective of whether it has even happened within the borders of the United States, we now see, to advance their radical, twisted, dark, and devious agenda of stripping decent, law-abiding, red-blooded American citizens of the right that they could best utilize to defend themselves from these sorts of heinous attacks. But, of course, it always ties in to the twisted agenda that they have, and they are incapable of separating themselves from these horrific views. But you know, there's more to these kinds of stories than what the salivating mainstream media leads on with. You know, so far, it doesn't tell us what motivated this guy, and I know it's still too soon to really fully comprehend what that might be, but you always have to wonder whether these people are just those types of sociopaths that will do anything to get their 15 minutes of fame. Folks, what we are seeing unfold here is something that is going to always be a part of us. There will always be that dark horse in society who is just hell-bent on spreading mass carnage and chaos, and we are not equipped to handle it, other than by our own design. And what I mean by that is, when you look at the natural law tenets that underpin our entire society here in the United States, it is one that is based on self-accountability. One has to be able to take responsibility for one's own action. And that has always been an integral part of the American societal framework. And to a lesser extent, it has been part of the Canadian framework too, because they too are part of that old English Commonwealth system that was more free than, say, the absolutist type system that existed in European nations such as France. But in Canada, I think they really do have this split personality, at least in Montreal, where they have very much so part of the French system within them. And you see vestiges of it here in the United States, in the state of Louisiana, which was part of that whole Louisiana Purchase, where we procured huge swaths of territory from Napoleonic France. And you have to remember that the French system of legality and their criminal justice system is based off of the Napoleonic Code. And the Napoleonic Code is absolutely foreign and incompatible, basically, with the type of common law judicial system we have here in the United States. And so we see that that type of system is different, and it doesn't necessarily espouse the type of values that our founding fathers had. Now, that's not saying that the people in Louisiana or anyone that's in a civil code type legal system are unpatriotic. They're very patriotic, and yes, they would still want to embrace freedom. It's just a different outlook and approach. But where it becomes dangerous is when the President of the United States of America starts looking to foreign law to basically start building new public policy here in the United States, because that is divorced from the foundational vision that made this country great. And stop and think about it for a moment, folks. We here in the United States have the longest contiguous running constitutional document or governmental document in all of world history. And you think of all the turmoil that has happened in the geopolitical sphere since the foundation and establishment of the United States of America, and you start to get a picture of just how staggering it really is that the United States Constitution has been in place as long as it has. You see, during this time, we had the Napoleonic Wars, we had our Civil War, World War I, World War II, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, Gulf War I, Iraq and Afghanistan. During that time, we went from having no electricity to the internet age. We went from horse-drawn buggies to space travel. You know, that is amazing. And it shows that the natural law tenets that underpin our shared Constitution are absolutely timeless. That means that irrespective of what the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media or this Barack Hussein Obama regime want you to believe with respect to our fundamental and unalienable right to keep and bear firearms, and with just the Constitution in general, it cannot become outdated. It cannot become antiquated. This whole rubbish argument that our founding fathers would have never anticipated the type of modern firearms that we have today is rubbish. It's rubbish because it is trying to pin modern concerns on something that is infinite in its scope of application. Because, as I have said numerous times on past episodes of the Wright Flyer, the natural law tenets are timeless. That means that they are equally applicable today as they were 200 years ago and as they will be 200 years from now. And I know it may sound as though that point just gets reiterated far too much, But the fact of the matter remains that it is such an important point that it bears repeating. And that is why I am repeating it. Because when you recall that these things are applicable until the end of time itself, then it is intellectually disingenuous, absolutely a specious argument to make that these rights are antiquated. And the other thing that you need to keep in mind with respect to these types of selectivist arguments with respect to our fundamental right to keep and bear firearms is if they can apply it to the Second Amendment, then they damn well can apply it to every other amendment contained within the four corners of the Bill of Rights or the first 10 amendments to the United States Constitution. And as per Article 5, which explains the methodology by which the Constitution may be properly amended, and even by the language to the preamble to the Bill of Rights itself, we know for a fact that the amendments are absolutely a part of the Constitution itself, as if they had been included in the original drafting of that sacred document. Now, folks, that is a very dangerous thing. Not that those amendments are part of the Constitution, but the type of thought process and the type of analysis being placed on the Second Amendment by these greedy, feckless, spineless weasels of politicians and this Obama regime shows that they would just leap at any opportunity to strip the citizens of this great social contract that ensures that popular sovereignty remains in place. And that is something that cannot be ignored. Now, the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media absolutely want us to ignore that, or not even to consider it, its existence. And this regime, which basically pines for a totalitarian, despotic, potentate-style state, want it, and don't want us to think about it, because they want to fundamentally transform this country and everything that it represents. Folks, I am not making this up. That is what Obama meant when he said, back on the campaign trail in 2008, that we were going to fundamentally transform the United States. Why did we ever need to fundamentally transform the United States? Why would we need to tamper with the longest contiguous running constitutional document in all of world history throughout the annals of the modern world? It makes no sense. It makes no sense unless you realize that they want to fall back onto this Fabian socialist model, and socialism, which is diametrically opposed to all of the constitutional tenets and principles of our representative Republican form of government, and speaks against the Constitution, which, as per Article 6, Clause 2, is absolutely the supreme law of the land, then you come to the realization that what they want is illegal, because it is violative of the supreme law of the land. Again, this is not the sort of analysis that you are going to hear from the outlets of the salivating mainstream media, nor will you hear it from the detente members of the gutless opposition party or GOP, because, once again, it goes against the propagandistic message that they are touting as absolute truth. It goes against this very idea of control and amassing power at the expense of the popular sovereigns, we the people. And there really is something truly diabolical about that. And what I mean by that is, when you examine the way that this country was formed and the fierce debates that our founding fathers had, both in the Federalist and Anti-Federalist papers, you see that the struggle of the natural sovereign, or the popular sovereign, and to protect the sacred, fundamental, and unalienable rights of said popular sovereigns has been a central struggle throughout the existence of this country, dating back to its inception. Now, that's not something to be taken lightly. Again, it shows why it is of the utmost importance that we all have a fluent and working knowledge and understanding of our shared Constitution and thereby our fundamental and unalienable rights. Because through that working knowledge, we understand and can more easily detect, root out, and absolutely rebut any and all efforts to push us towards the chains and shackles of tyranny, despotism, and oppression. And that is why it is such a frightening thought to see the way that the Obama regime has been acting. And certainly it shows how devious the statement made by Bruce Hayman is. Absolutely, we should offer the condolences to the families of the victims. It is a horrific tragedy. No one should ever have to go through that. But to try and use this to gain political clout or political points off the backs of a tragedy is not only inhumane, it is downright evil. You see, folks, this whole notion of moral relativism has struck at the heart not only of the United States, but of the entire Western world. We are placing ourselves at the altar of political correctness, offering ourselves up as a sacrifice because we somehow, in the past, had done devious, wicked, terrible things, or at least that is what the acolytes of tolerance, so-called tolerance, marching under the banner of intolerance, actually believe and push for. You see it time and again with the so-called Million Student March. You see it time and again with this view of the up-and-coming generation that America has always been an unfair place because we were founded by bigoted, racist, slave-owning, women-hating white men. That is what has been drummed into their head since they first set foot in an institution of education here in the United States. Revisionism, political correctness, and all of this worthless diatribe and indoctrination from the radical and extreme fringes of the left has plunged this country into a dangerous situation. But again, it's not just our nation, though we focus primarily on that because our main concern is to get this country back to its roots and its foundational vision by going back to strict adherence to the natural law tenets that underpin the Constitution and the Constitution itself, but it also affects the entire Western world. Look at what is happening in Germany with respect to the so-called Syrian refugees. We have radical, frothing at the mouth, left-wing extremist politicians, female ones at that, saying that women should, change their behavior. German citizen women should change their behavior so as to not inflame tensions with the Syrian refugees and to prevent themselves from getting raped. That is a barbaric point of view. And yet we see here in the United States that the Fabian socialists keep harping on this nonsensical doctrine of a war on women by those adherents of the right and those of us who merely wish to preserve the natural order of things and our shared Constitution. Yet they don't utter a peep about that. They don't speak about that. And it shows that there is this drastic, draconian double standard that is absolutely killing free thought, independent action, and liberty here in the West. Folks, the truly nefarious thing about all of this is is that the doctrine of political correctness has absolutely been developed by the so-called New Left. And you see, folks, there's that weasel word again, putting new in front of something to strip us of all of those fundamental beliefs, all of our fundamental and unalienable rights, to destroy the so-called establishment and replace it with the failed doctrines of Karl Marx and the various other just intellectually disingenuous socialist movements. It goes absolutely against everything that we stand for and represent. Everything that we value is completely incompatible with a socialist system. And therefore, socialism should never be adopted here in the United States. But again, you won't hear this from the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media. You won't hear it from the detente wing of the gutless opposition party. But it's funny, the one person who has absolutely, completely, in entirety, shifted his political views from the ones that he has held for the entire span of his adult life, Donald J. Trump, you see people flocking to him because they perceive him as being a sort of Teflon candidate, one that can overcome all the muck and morass of political correctness and somehow right the country. But folks, he is an adherent to the cancerous doctrine of political correctness. All one needs to do is look back to the way he reacted in the last nationally televised gutless opposition party presidential candidate debate with that whole New York values attack that he threw at Cruz, to see that it was a politically correct argument that he was throwing out. He made the erroneous connection to 9/11 about something that ties into a statement that he made to ABC News, I believe it was, back in 1999. And we've played the clips of how he has absolutely flip-flopped on his position. And that carries no meaning to his acolytes, to his followers. They don't care. And I've even seen the so-called trumpeteers coming out and saying, oh, his past, it really doesn't matter. It's the future that matters. Folks, as a historian, I'm going to tell you this is why the woeful state of our history education here in America is so dangerous and has been such a malicious, cancerous, and destructive development, because people no longer know what the foundations of this country are. They no longer know that you look to the past to learn the patterns of what happens in society and the way that society conducts itself to be able to adjust your decisions to make the future better. That's where the old adage, those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it, comes from. And to see this type of bold-faced, erroneous thinking being espoused by so-called Tea Party members and so-called conservatives and religious conservatives in the United States really, really, really is a shocking development. It's not shocking in the fact that it's happened. It's just terrible because when you look at the past, you see what that type of behavior leads to. Remember, one of the questions that was always asked in the immediate aftermath of the Second World War and the fall of Nazi Germany, the collapse of the so-called Third Reich, was how could an educated, civilized people like the Germans fall for the twisted machinations of Nazism, National Socialism, and Adolf Hitler? Well, it's when they shut their eyes to the past, when they turn themselves away from the warning signs, completely ignoring them, And when they are hell-driven by this unquenchable thirst for blind vengeance, we see a potentate, a tyrant, a dictator rise from the ashes, rise from the murky depths of the body politic to seize the reins of power and to plunge the nation into madness. And don't think that the United States of America is not ripe for that type of political development right now as we speak. Because everywhere we turn, we see both the détente members, or the détente wing of the gutless opposition party, or GOP, and the Fabian socialists of the Democrat Nazi Committee absolutely ignoring the will of the popular sovereigns. And when you also keep in mind that the United States of America and our representative Republican form of government is based on the idea of popular sovereignty, meaning that the government cannot rule without the consent of the people, and that at least 2/4, possibly even 3/4 of the American population feels as though the government at all levels is ruling without their consent, you see the type of anger that can be exploited by those who have ulterior motives. Now, I can't say for certain what Donald J. Trump's motives are, but I can tell you that his past statements, his past views, his past beliefs are not in line with traditional conservative values. They are not in line with the natural law tenets that underpin our shared Constitution, and thereby they are not in line with the law of the United States. And that means that the followers of Donald Trump are making a grave mistake. I want to caution you about him. I want to caution you about the sort of danger that this could unleash upon the last best beacon of hope, freedom, and liberty, and true justice left in all the globe. Folks, we cannot take this lightly, yet the trumpeteers, the so-called trumpeteers, are absolutely taking this lightly. They are absolutely ignoring the detrimental impacts that this could have, the irreparable harm that it could cause, absolutely, to our representative Republican form of government, to our liberty, and ultimately to our way of life. It's why I find what Sarah Palin did so puzzling. And it's not so puzzling in so much as the fact that you think that she's been bought off. Because that is the only conclusion that I can find that would explain how she could abandon her supposedly strong-held, deeply held convictions and embrace a man who, up until this election cycle, embraced a political mindset that was absolutely diametrically opposed to the one that he's holding now. You would think that these people would take the time necessary to research the positions that their candidate has held in the past, because we have seen, based just as recently as the midterm elections of November 2014, candidates that will lie about their convictions, about their political platform, just to gain political expediency. And we have seen the type of anger that has wrought out of the popular sovereigns. Folks, we are popular sovereigns, but with popular sovereignty comes great duty and responsibility. We cannot just allow ourselves to be swept away by raw emotionalism, because that makes it so easy to manipulate us that we will be used as useful idiots to carry out the twisted machinations and goals and objectives of Fabian socialists, whose entire stated objective is to destroy the political framework of the United States, to destroy the greatest, most free, most open and honest society that the world has ever seen. And we see it in the way that they try and exploit the tragedies, like the shooting in Saskatchewan, Canada, for political brownie points. Folks, that is disgusting. That is horrific. That should have no place in a truly free and open society. But this is where we find ourselves today, because there is this anger, because the supposed representatives of the people have been doing anything but represent their constituents. Popular sovereignty must always be the key component of a free government. And so what does this all suggest? It suggests that we have moved away from being a free society, that we have moved towards the shackles and chains of tyranny, despotism, and oppression. And that should be sounding alarm bells and raising red flags for decent, red-blooded American citizens throughout this country. But again, we have a complacent media with the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media running before their cameras, once again trying to obfuscate the truth to push forth this twisted Fabian socialist agenda. And that has led to increased anger. But folks, that's why Jeremy and yours truly come before this microphone the way that we do each and every time, to provide you with the truth. Now, I don't expect you to take what I'm saying here at face value. I expect you to look into this. And I know that I have repeated this time and again on past episodes of the Wright Flyer, but it is absolutely the truth. Our entire purpose here, our entire goal with the Wright Flyer is to empower you, the popular sovereigns, so that you can take your government back, so that you can hold on to the reins of political power as it was always meant to be since the very foundation of this country over 200 years ago. Now think about that. Is anyone else saying that what they want to do is empower you? That's certainly not what you're going to get from the Fabian socialists on the Democrat side or on the left. It's certainly not what you're going to get from the detente wing of the gutless opposition party or GOP. They're going to say that, yes, they want to lift people up out of poverty, but the way that they do that is to push everyone else down. Our message here is to go back to the tenets of our Constitution, to go back to the proper scope and application of government as outlined, defined, and mandated by our shared Constitution, so that we can each work to the best of our abilities to improve our own station in life. Free will, self-accountability, and self-responsibility, folks, are the way that we will be successful. That is why, in our short but illustrious history, that we, the United States, have risen to the lofty heights that we have in the past. But we certainly cannot turn away from it. We cannot ignore it. Nor can we push ourselves towards a brighter future, because I absolutely reject the campaign slogan of Donald J. Trump of "Make America Great Again." America never stopped being great. The only reason that we are suffering the setbacks that we have seen in this country is because we refuse to embrace those tenets that make us great. But they're still there. They're inherently there. They will always be there because they are natural law principles which are timeless. But again, you're not going to hear this from the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media. You're not going to hear this from Donald J. Trump. You're not going to hear this from any of the other candidates, except for one. The one who has done more than any other candidate up on that stage to defend the Constitution and the fundamental and unalienable rights of the popular sovereigns, Ted Cruz. And folks, that's why we have endorsed him here on the Wright Flyer. Now, adding to this moreau of anti-gun and gun-grabbing mentality, we have also seen come out of CNN, which of course is automatically suspect because it is the communist news network or the Clinton news network. But anyway, we see coming out of CNN that Michael Bloomberg, the former mayor of New York City, you know, the one who absolutely espouses so-called New York values, is seriously considering a potential White House bid. Now, this comes from Kevin Bond, Jake Tapper, and Carl DeVries from CNN, and was published on January 23rd, 2016, so today. And it says that former New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg is seriously considering a possible independent presidential run and is looking at making a decision sometime in March. And what's funny about this is you have to recall that Bloomberg is one of those massive funders behind this orchestrated effort to deprive law-abiding, red-blooded American citizens, the decent, hard-working people that are absolutely the ultimate and supreme popular sovereigns of the United States, of their fundamental and unalienable right to keep and bear firearms. He's the type of propagandist that Zygmunt Dobbs warned of in his basically, opus magnus of Keynes at Harvard. He said that these are the duplicitous type of people who will say anything to advance the Fabian socialist agenda, irrespective of the harm that it causes to the country. Now, when you stop and think about that for a moment, folks, I mean, really stop and think about it. The Fabian socialists have tried this incremental approach to socialism ever since they were first established. But, like all forms of socialism, and indeed any radical or extremist left-wing ideology, the Fabian socialists completely advocate for the destruction of the culture and political system that existed prior to socialism eking its way into a society and forcefully taking the reins of political power. You see it with the Cultural Revolution in China. You see it in the way that the Islamofascists, such as the Islamic State or ISIS, goes around blowing up beautiful ancient artifacts and monuments. And you see it in the way that the groups like Black Lives Matters and the NAACP, whom Zygmunt Dobbs also pointed to as having extremely radical left-wing, even Marxist tendencies from their leaderships, pushing to remove any and all signs of the Confederate States of America, making these specious and absolutely intellectually disingenuous arguments that the Confederacy is akin to a Nazi movement that occurred within the borders of the United States of America. Now, the reason I find this so intellectually disingenuous is that if you recall what the Confederacy is, it's speaking out against federalism. Now, the tenets of federalism as developed in our shared constitution is more centralized than what existed in America's proto-constitution. And what I mean by proto-constitution is the contractual agreement between the several states, which at that time were the 13 original colonies, as it was originally drafted while the American War of Independence was going on, to commingle and exist together in a union. But it was much less centralized than the current Constitution. So much so that the states were actually unable to get anything done. They were unable to fund the government, and they were unable to provide for the national defense. So that is why they came together in Philadelphia for the convention, and that is how our shared United States Constitution came into being. And to say that the Confederates, who were actually seeking to return to a less centralized form of government, is anything like the Nazis, which is just basically an acronym for the National Socialist German Workers' Party in German, is absolutely specious. It has no foundation in history, no roots in reality, because it is an intellectually disingenuous statement designed to close all arguments. This is the type of propaganda that the Fabian socialists are well known for. And it's not just the Fabian socialists, it's anyone who proclaims to be a member of the so-called New Left. The New Left is all about depriving what came before and using labels to make sure that people turn off their intellectual faculties. Now, why would they do this? It's because they don't want the issues to actually be discussed. They don't want the reality to come to the surface, because they know that their arguments are based on raw emotionalism and have no chance of succeeding with the actual American people, and has no chance of winning in the marketplace of ideas. You see, that's what it always comes down to. It comes down to these revisionist historians and the acolytes of the cancerous doctrine of political correctness attempting to rewrite everything that we hold near and dear about the country. Now, let's face it, folks, the Confederate States of America is a part of American history. The war between the states was a part of American history. If we start whitewashing our history, we start trying to create a lie. But that is what these radical extremist socialists and left-wing ideologues always do. It's what fanatics believe. And just look at how ISIS does it. You know, what was it? Within the last week or two, that ISIS destroyed the oldest Christian monastery in all of the ancient country of Iraq? Folks, why is it that there's a double standard with all of this? Why is it that these so-called progressives are acting like the barbarians who are destroying our links to the ancient past? You see, folks, again, it plays into that adage which haunts the minds of men throughout history, that those who do not know their history are doomed to repeat the mistakes of the past. We are fast approaching such a crossroads in our country right now, here and today. But what's even more nefarious about all of these efforts that are coming together in a great culmination of radical socialism and despotism at the doorstep of the free world is that it is a multifaceted approach, and they are ramping up their efforts to dislodge everything that is great about the United States. They are doubling down on their efforts to tear our Constitution, which is the foundational bedrock of our entire representative Republican system of government, apart at the seams. They are destructive. That's all they know. And you can see from every position of which they advocate that they are absolutely hell-bent on destroying everything that is decent about our shared Constitution, our shared national character, heritage, spirit, and above all, identity. Again, this is why people like Donald J. Trump resonate. But to show you that the détente mentality that is held by the détente wing of the gutless opposition party, or GOP, is absolutely destructive, just look at the way that the radicals never want to let people live. You know, détente is just a form of saying live and let live. Let things be. Surely they won't be as radical as they are acting. Surely they will open their eyes to the hard facts and evidence of reality and life. But that is not how radicals work. That is not how these fanatics work. All you have to do is look at Bloomberg's attempts to radically transform, fundamentally transform New York City. As mayor, remember, he was the one that pushed the ban for large sugary soft drinks. Again, it all falls into what Alexander de Tocqueville said with respect to socialists, in that they want to micromanage every facet, every minutia of our daily lives, to the point that they are absolutely establishing a new age form of feudalism. That is what they don't want you to see or to understand. And that is why you will never hear the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media ever analyze these stories in such a fashion. It's because it would expose their true colors and intent and destroy their propagandistic message. You see, folks, they are so wedded to their ideology that ideology means everything to them. They don't see shared values. They believe in moral relativism, and they believe in pushing this country over the precipice into the abyss of destruction, death, carnage, chaos, tyranny, despotism, and above all, oppression. You see it with the cancerous doctrine of political correctness, which is wholeheartedly being used and utilized as a weapon to deprive us of our fundamental and unalienable right to free speech. You know, the freedom of expression that these radical and extremist Fabian socialists are attacking is a double-edged sword, the way they're using it. They selectively enforce it, pushing for it for their causes, while using the mantle of so-called tolerance to tear down any ideology which might question their heavy-handed, oppressive tactics as being either lunatics completely out of touch with a modern society, which is also why they have shrouded themselves in the erroneous mantle of progressive. That moniker has no application to their type of thinking. Their type of thinking, as Zygmunt Dobbs so poignantly pointed out in Keynes at Harvard, is akin more to the caveman than to Western civilization. They want to push us back to this twisted form of government known as feudalism, where they see themselves as the select few, the autocracy or aristocracy, to rule over the great unwashed Huns. But who are these great unwashed Huns that they do everything in their power to besmirch and belittle, to denigrate, to point the finger and laugh at, and to say are nothing but a bunch of uncultured, unsophisticated rubes? Why, these are the very people that our founding fathers believed were the popular sovereigns, the ultimate wielders of sovereigns in the greatest free country and the longest-running constitutional republic this world has ever seen. We, the people of the United States of America. And folks, they will not back down off of this message. You know that they won't. They are more rabid now than ever because they see victory within their grasp. They see that it is so easy now because of the feckless and meaningless efforts by the detente wing of the gutless opposition party to resist their steps, that they are able to come out in front of the cameras of the salivating mainstream media and proclaim themselves as socialists. That's why Bernie Sanders, Sanders, is doing better than Hillary Rotten Clinton in the polls at Iowa, or I think it's at Iowa now too, but it's certainly at New Hampshire. And it all points back to this undeniable fact that the Fabian socialists have pushed us to the left. And Bloomberg now thinks that he might actually have a chance to throw his hat in the ring, and I have no question in my mind that this decision, or this pondering on his part, feeling the waters, sending the balloon out, is absolutely and entirely inspired by the so-called magnetic success of lifelong progressive, now suddenly turned supposed conservative Donald J. Trump. You know, Donald J. Trump is able to project an image. He distorts reality all around him, and his followers have bought it hook, line, and sinker. But what is the truth about Donald J. Trump? What are his real positions? Ask him to delve in and to provide you with answers as to how we will go back to strict adherence to the Constitution, and I assure you, you'll get a deer in the headlights look from him, because he hasn't even contemplated it. He is not the sort who knows much about the Constitution, because he is a businessman first and foremost. He would put business above country patriotism and our fundamental and unalienable rights. Now, how can I say this? Because of his own words. Sure, you can say that his past doesn't matter, but that is how you are going to judge the way that this man is going to act in the future. That is how you will be able to determine the decisions he will make and the manner in which he will run the country. Now, he's already come out and stated, according to Wright Scoop, that you have to be a member of the so-called establishment in order to get anything done in Washington. So you see, folks, already Donald J. Trump is delving into the same twisted game of semantics that these left-wing ideologues jump into each and every time. This is why we warned you about semantics and the way that the Fabian socialists and the adherents of any form of utopian socialism and moral relativism play these games. They twist the meaning of words. And people like former Alaska Governor Sarah Palin seem to have completely bought it. They are detached from the scope of reality, and they have been duped by a debonair conman. But folks, when you have a fluent and working knowledge and understanding of our shared United States Constitution, and thereby your fundamental and unalienable rights, it becomes all the easier to spot these charlatans, these snake oil salesmen, for who they really are. And it becomes that much easier to say the most powerful two-letter word in all of the English language, which is damn near universally understood, and that word is no. And you can say it with force because you are the popular sovereigns. No one owns this country other than you. It doesn't belong to the government. It doesn't belong to the Barack Hussein Obama regime. It doesn't belong to Donald J. Trump. I don't care how much money he wants to throw at it. The United States and its natural law tenets, which underpin its Constitution, which is the greatest binding legal contract of any society on the face of this earth, is not up for sale. But you wouldn't know that from the people like Sarah Palin, who sit there and say that he's the master of the deal, and that's what we need. Folks, when we have leadership, true leadership, that is based on the natural law tenets that underpin our shared United States Constitution, that respects the tenets of federalism as they have existed, and the proper balance and division of powers as our founding fathers intended, you don't deal on those. Those are your foundational principles. If you don't have a moral compass, and you don't have a true sense of justice, and a deliberate and unwavering understanding of reality and justice and morality, then you will absolutely sell your soul to the devil. You see, folks, that is just how far we have plunged as a nation. And it is the fault of the Fabian socialists who orchestrated a coup of the Democrat Party and the detente wing of the gutless opposition party. The absolute failure of leadership and the blatant attempts to disregard the popular sovereigns in this nation has unleashed a wave of anger that once Pandora's box is open, and believe me, this is a proverbial Pandora's box, that cannot be closed. The American people are out for blood, but when they are this angry, And when they are blinded by passion, it is easy to manipulate them. They become malleable to the hands of wicked political sorcery. Because that's what this is, folks. To blatantly disregard the heartfelt beliefs of Donald J. Trump and what he advocated in the past when he was contemplating a run with the so-called Reform Party. Remember, folks, that was the party created by Ross Perot. That he wanted to absolutely allow abortion, that he was pro-choice in every sense of the word, even though he hated the concept, trying to walk that thin veneer of a line, taking both sides of an issue. That is classic so-called establishment politician. Because they don't want to take a position because that might actually disenfranchise a certain group of voters who might back them. But remember what I have said on a couple of episodes now, folks. The game of semantics here with the word establishment. And the way that Trump is tinkering with the meaning yet again to paint it as though you have to wheel and deal entirely with respect to the United States Constitution and the foundational principles of our great representative Republican form of government, that tells you that he doesn't believe that the supreme law of the land, which, as per Article 6, Clause 2, is unquestionably the United States Constitution, is binding or permanent or timeless. Folks, that is the last thing that we need to adopt in this country. And the type of chaos that has been unleashed by all of this has allowed Bloomberg, who's 73, to consider a run for the Oval Office. And he's going to push for his anti-gun extremist agenda. He's done it in the past. He's still doing it now with those efforts to just buy up advertisements to brainwash and indoctrinate the American people into believing that firearms, which is a quintessential part of American society ever since our foundation, is somehow what's wrong with the nation. So if you stop and think about that, folks, the connection is that he believes that what allowed our country to come into existence in the first place is something that is wrong with society. That is what is wrong with these feckless Fabian socialists who are willing to do anything to destroy everything that is great about this country. And this is why Jeremy and I come to the microphone to warn you about this, folks. We want you to see the truth. We want you to be empowered. We want you to be able to stand up to these potentates, dictators, tyrants, and despots and say enough is enough and to hell with you. You cannot take away my fundamental and unalienable rights. My Constitution's not up for sale. Because if you remember, folks, as the ultimate wielders of sovereignty, you, me, Jeremy, Nelson, our family, our loved ones, those of us who are American citizens, whether we be natural born or naturalized, are the true owners of the United States Constitution. And when these people want to use the wealth that they have amassed for themselves, and I do not hold it against either Donald J. Trump or Michael Bloomberg, that they have amassed wealth. But when they want to use that wealth to infringe upon our fundamental and unalienable rights, that creates a significant problem. And that is something that not only should I be objecting to, but every decent red-blooded American who gives a damn about this country ought to object to. But that's the thing, folks. We have fallen into this period of societal decay that is baffling. It goes against every fiber of the foundational vision that our founding fathers had for this great republic since its inception well over 2 centuries ago. And we know he being Bloomberg, is tone deaf when it comes to the people. That's why he pushed for those things which absolutely speak to what Donald Trump meant when he said that being pro-choice was part of his New York values. Folks, that didn't come from Ted Cruz alone. He was not the progenitor of that statement. He was not the source of that statement. Those words came from Donald J. Trump's lips themselves. And Donald J. Trump is the one who is attempting to obfuscate the truth here by making that absolutely intellectually disingenuous conclusion that what Ted Cruz was talking about was 9/11. Newsflash, Trumpy. And maybe you ought to, loosen the skunk fur pelt on your head just a little bit. But 9/11 had nothing to do with what was said. In fact, you made those statements to ABC News before 9/11 happened. But you see, folks, this is the type of revisionism that we see occurring throughout our country. We see it within our institutions of higher learning. We see it in the bastions from the so-called information media, from those snake oil salesmen that are the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media. They don't want to push the truth here. And part of the reason that CNN is trying to conclude that Michael Bloomberg is seeking perhaps to run for the presidency via an independent ticket is because he has recently earned conservatives' ire with his push for greater gun control. That should be a universal objection and disqualification for this scumbag to try and seek the reins of political power in this country. It should absolutely bar him from the highest office in the land. But have we become so deluded as a nation now that that is who we can look to as leadership? Well, no, I don't think so for Michael Bloomberg. I don't think he stands, to use an old, rather harsh statement, a snowball's chance in hell of ever procuring the reins of political power in this country. But maybe one wouldn't be thought of as foolish before this election cycle to have thought that Donald J. Trump, with as high of negative opinions that people hold of him, would be the front runner for the gutless opposition party. Nobody would have thought that a die-in-the-wool progressive who is diametrically opposed to the values held by anyone who seeks to preserve the application of the Constitution and thereby the proper scope and application of government, and indeed the supreme law of the land, could become the leader, the messianic leader of that movement. It makes no sense, except for the fact that people are blinded by rage. They are so sick of the corruption that they are willing to allow a charlatan who makes nothing but false claims and has no set values to become the next president of the United States or to become their leader. That tells you that this country is in dire straits. And the reason that it's in dire straits is not because of the corruption. The corruption is but a mere symptom of the actual problem that is facing the United States and her people as I speak into this microphone. The actual problem is that government has divorced itself from our shared United States Constitution. That is the problem. That is what we are facing. That is what we are going to have to overcome. And trust me, folks, this is not going to be an easy path. to take. It never is. Not with these people. Not with the potentates who are hell-bent on depriving the American citizens of their God-given liberties. It's a frightening thought that we have fallen to this place. And if we are not careful, the harm which someone like a Michael Bloomberg or a Donald J. Trump, those who, using Trump's own words, espouse so-called New York values, will cause this country cannot be underestimated. Folks, if you want to know what real New York values are, you have to go back to the foundation of this country. The fact that we are pitting ourselves against each other is a sign that Barack Hussein Obama's campaign to divide and conquer and thereby fundamentally transform this great representative Republican form of government of ours is working. And it's working because he has ratcheted up the pressure on all of us. He has created and planted the seeds of balkanization within the borders of the United States, which should have no place in a free, open, and honest society like that of the United States of America. But there we are, folks. There we are. And then if you had any question about the way that Donald J. Trump is actually looking at his supporters, the way that he thinks of them as useful idiots to be utilized as pawns in his game of amassing power for himself, all you have to do is look at recent statements he said today. At least recent statements that were reported via NBC. Now, I know NBC is not someone to be trusted, but they have the video. They have the video of Trump saying all of this stuff about what he could do and what people would tolerate. And it is just shocking because what it shows is that he absolutely follows the Clintonian mindset that he can do just about anything. And that's very dangerous. And I've got the clip right here. It's loading up.
So smart. And you know what else they say about my people? The polls. They say, I have the most loyal people. Did you ever see that? Where I could stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and I wouldn't lose any voters, okay? It's like incredible. No, they say, Trump, we love you too, man. Trump's voters are by far, you know, I'm at 68, 69%. I'm at 90% total. Like, will you say absolutely? I think it's 68 or 69%.
Look at that. Look at the way he views his people. Look at the way he absolutely believes that he can do no wrong. That is the type of disconnect that leads to the destructive mentality that absolutely breeds the type of corruption that the American people are sick and tired of. But they are so blinded by their passion right now that they cannot see the forest despite the trees. But it's there, folks. It's there. His track record's there. It's undeniable. And the tactics, those grotesque and nasty tactics that he is using, just openly display who he is. You know, Rush said it best when he said that a true conservative, and by that he means those of us who adhere to the natural law tenets that underpin our Constitution and our shared Constitution itself, would not go after Ted Cruz the way that Trump has. But Trump says he could shoot somebody and still maintain support. That's what Hillary Clinton was hoping for. She was thinking that she could utilize the name recognition of the Clinton dynasty to keep fighting for whatever she believed in, and to just allow her to waltz into the presidency. It's that same type of elitist mentality. And he is making no bones about it. But folks, you have to realize that he couldn't give two licks about you, at least in your capacity as popular sovereign, because he doesn't believe in it. He doesn't believe in it. That's why he's willing to work against the Constitution. It's why he's willing to double down on the same type of illegal use of executive orders as the Barack Hussein Obama administration has. Now, folks, when you have something like that in your midst, it just brings you closer to the precipice of destruction. And it means that we will have to work that much harder to bring this country back from the brink of ruination. Again, folks, this is why it is so important for each and every one of us to have a fluent and working knowledge and understanding of our shared United States Constitution and thereby our fundamental and unalienable rights. And so while what we see in Canada is absolutely a tragedy, an undeniable tragedy, it is still being used as fodder by the salivating mainstream media, by those feckless utopian and Fabian socialists, and by those who are diametrically opposed to anything that has made this country great. You see, when Donald Trump touts his campaign slogan as "Make America Great Again," it is inferring that our Constitution has failed. It is inferring that the foundational vision that our founding fathers had for this nation over 200 years ago, which has stood the test of the sands of time better than any other government on the face of this planet in modern history, has failed. And he'll replace it. But with what? He never answers the question of what he would replace it with. He would replace it with socialism. Now, I'm sure I can already hear the cynical trumpeter in the background raising up his pipsqueak-style mousy voice and saying, "Randy, how dare you? You can't say to speak for his mind. You don't know what's in his mind." Yes, I do. Yes, I do. He has repeatedly said that we need universal health care. That's single-party payer, folks. That's socialism to take care of everyone. He doesn't believe in your ability to take care of yourself, to provide for yourself, or he doesn't even acknowledge your humanity to enough of a degree to believe that you should be the ultimate say in whether or not you have to have health insurance, whether or not you want that kind of insurance, and the type of health care you would receive. Add to that his idea that ultimately, based on this interview with Larry King Live back in 1999, that the American people shouldn't own guns, and there you have it, folks. Do you think that his core views have changed? Do you really believe that he has somehow just overnight magically changed every core principle and philosophy that he has held near and dear? Folks, people don't do that unless they are operating with an ulterior motive. What is the ulterior motive of Donald J. Trump? Oh, you can't look at his past. Fine. Just recently, he has come out and stated again that the doctrine of eminent domain is wonderful. You know, folks, you may ignore that until it comes down to it's your property that they're coming to take, to then hand to some private sleazeball casino and real estate mogul, absolutely violating the fundamental principles that are behind what eminent domain was for, orchestrating what is truly an unlawful taking, and using the heavy-handed, tyrannical, and oppressive hand of government to forcibly remove someone from their own property, irrespective of what value that property holds to them, and not just monetary value, sentimental value as well. That is absolutely contrary to the foundational vision. It's the fiber and grain of everything that our founding fathers fought so hard to bring about. And folks, the past matters because the founding fathers wanted to hand down a free and open society based on our Constitution to posterity. That means to last eternity. But for Donald J. Trump, it doesn't mean that at all. Donald J. Trump is just using his followers as pawns in a political game to expand his clout and power. He's toying with the American people. And should he procure the highest office in the land, mark my words, folks, he would drive this country further off the cliff into the abyss of destruction. But the fact of the matter is, Donald J. Trump cannot win in the general election. He is too divisive. Irrespective of the fact that he has managed to win over the base, I cannot see him winning over the general electorate. In fact, I could see a Bernie Sanders winning over the general electorate before he could have a Trump do it. Now, think about it, folks. You have GOP, gutless opposition party detente members like Bob Dole coming out and saying that they would rather have nerd-faced Bernie Sanders as president than Ted Cruz. Why? Again, why? That nagging question of why should be at the very tip of your tongues. And the answer is because Cruz has a well-established track record of defending the Constitution. He was the most able Solicitor General the state of Texas has ever had. And he has, on repeated occasions, gone before the Supreme Court of the United States of America, stood up for, defended, and protected the fundamental and unalienable rights of the American people. He prevented international law from being allowed to supersede our shared Constitution. When has Donald J. Trump ever done that? Folks, the answer is never. Trump has never, not once, done that in the span of his adult life. Instead, he's used his radical Fabian socialist federal judge sister, appointed by Bill Clinton, mind you, to take land from its rightful owners to put up a limousine parking lot for his casino. Folks, that's what he's going to do with the Constitution. He's going to tear down the foundations of this country so that he can build a limousine parking lot. That is the last thing we need in this country. His history is not hidden, folks. And those who buy into this whole notion that he is somehow now a constitutional conservative have only themselves to blame for the blinders that they have put over their own eyes. They have led themselves astray. The answer to all of our problems rests in the Constitution. And under a President Trump, and I'm speaking hypothetically here, of course, we would still see tragedies that occur in outside countries to be utilized as reasons to strip and deprive American citizens of their fundamental and unalienable rights. You must recall that in his first televised advertisement, he showed a Turkish immigration crossing with people flooding across and tried to pass that off as the American border. And he's retweeted things from neo-Nazis, and he has done things that are questionable and dubious at best. Folks, we cannot allow that in our country, because it would be the death of this country. Again, that is why Jeremy and I say that it is so important that each and every one of us possess a fluent and working knowledge and understanding of our shared United States Constitution, and thereby our fundamental and unalienable rights. And with that said, it is time for us to begin our descent. I'm going to go ahead and send the flight attendant back for one last round of alcohol. Folks, as always, I'm your captain, Randy Wright, and I want to invite you to please leave comments, concerns, either here on our Facebook page, on our YouTube page, or on our Facebook page, or our Google Plus page. And we hope that you join us the next time we take off over the friendly airwaves, providing you with an indelible yet pure sense of enlightenment, as we always do. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for flying the Wright Flyer. We hope to see you next time. Do take care.